France 24's Gulliver Cragg has more on the reaction to Zelensky's meeting with Donald Trump.
Not disastrous, but certainly disappointing. The Ukrainian president was reportedly surprised when he arrived in the United States to learn that Donald Trump had spoken to Vladimir Putin and that they were planning another meeting. And the rhetoric on supplying these Tomahawks markedly shifted before the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky even started. Donald Trump was saying that actually the US maybe needs them and clearly showing less enthusiasm for supplying them to Ukraine than he had been in previous days. But perhaps more important than the Tomahawks is the shift in Donald Trump's rhetoric. The Ukrainians had the impression that they were making progress in convincing Donald Trump that Vladimir Putin didn't really want peace and that he was essentially bluffing or tapping the US president along, to use the expression that Donald Trump once used. And now Donald Trump is back to saying that he does think that Vladimir Putin wants peace. And this kind of line about letting history decide is obviously something that sounds really very unpleasant to the ears of Ukrainians who, along with their European allies, seem pretty clear that there's no need to wait for history to decide who is the aggressor in this war and that Russia's invasion of Ukraine was absolutely illegal. And the idea of letting both sides claim victory is not what the Ukrainians want at all. And also the rhetoric about Vladimir Putin wanting peace is not what the Ukrainians and most credible international experts believe. There are no serious indications that Vladimir Putin wants peace. So it looks very much as though he has managed to convince the US president that he's changed, that Vladimir Putin now is interested in these peace negotiations. Perhaps he made the US president believe that Russia had become afraid of the US supplying these Tomahawk missiles. But serious analysts don't think that Russia really is afraid or that Russia's position really has changed. And what's much more likely is that the Russian president is playing for time once again. Donald Trump even admitted that that might be the case, but I guess he feels that it's worth a try. The Ukrainians have no choice but to play along with and to agree with what the US president is saying. And that's why we saw Volodymyr Zelensky very conciliatory after the meeting with Donald Trump, trying to put a brave face on things. But this is not the meeting that he was hoping for.
For more on this, we can cross to Washington, D.C. and bring in Melinda Haring, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Melinda, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Now, as we were just hearing there from our correspondent, Zelensky was hoping to get some stuff out of this meeting, most specifically Tomahawk missiles, maybe at least just some robust support. Instead, Trump had said that both sides should stay where they are, let them both claim victory, and let history decide. So what happened here with this kind of shift in tone?
Great question. I think the only answer to your question is that Donald Trump, there we go again. He's a yo-yo on Russia, Ukraine, and he's unpredictable. We know that. So he could have gone in any direction yesterday. He could have authorized the use of Tomahawks, but President Putin sweet-talked him. That's the best answer I can give you. We don't know what President Putin offered him. He probably played for hubris. He probably suggested that the war is winnable and that he's open to discussions, although it's interesting that that Vladimir Putin has not committed to a meeting in Budapest. So I think that's very telling. But look, we know Trump wants a Pulitzer Prize, and he knows that Russia, Ukraine is the way to get it. So he's moved back from his rhetoric. It wasn't that long ago, Catherine, that Donald Trump was saying that Ukraine can win and it can retake the territory that it's lost. So he's been all over the map. We've seen his position harden over the last 6 months as Putin played him, and it looks like Putin is playing him once again. But Trump, I think for political reasons, wants to keep trying.
Now, it's interesting that you bring up that relationship with Vladimir Putin, because Trump's always said, I like him, we get each other, we understand each other. But as you were mentioning, in all of this diplomacy that he's been trying, that meeting in Alaska, really, Putin has not made any concessions. I mean, his demands are his demands. He hasn't changed tact. And anytime Ukraine makes inroads like pressing for Tomahawk, he says that will escalate it. I feel like what you were saying, you kind of hear his words coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. So if this meeting takes place, is anything going to change? And at what point could Trump be ready to get tough with Putin?
That's a great question. The answer to it is no. And it's really shocking, the statement that Trump put out immediately after the discussion with Zelensky yesterday. He basically said that we're going to give Moscow another shot at it, and that both parties need to stop fighting. So he's not acknowledging who started the war, and he's giving Putin the benefit of the doubt. There's no evidence, Catherine. You hit it spot on. There's no evidence that Putin has changed his mind, changed his intentions. He still wants to destroy Ukraine. He wants to tear apart Euro-Atlantic unity, and he wants to make the West look hypocritical. Those goals haven't changed. He hasn't changed his position, and I don't think we're going to the negotiating table. I think everyone wants this war to be over. No one wants the war to be over more than Ukrainians. But we are all dependent on the insanity of Vladimir Putin, and he bet his political legacy, he bet his presidency on this war. So nothing is going to change. The only people who are going to suffer are Ukrainians. We see the war continuing. I expect it to continue with the same intensity till about Christmas. Then the fighting will probably diminish a little bit, but the Russians are going to hold until next spring, summer at least, to find out what kind of deal they can get. So unfortunately, this war is going to continue, and we're going to see more civilian death, and the winter is going to get hard as Russia hits Ukraine's power grids and tries to force Ukrainians to flee their homes once again.
Melinda, I want to ask you a question about sanctions. I mean, Trump has mentioned in the past maybe he would impose some sanctions on Russia if they don't come to the negotiating table. Apparently, he also said India has agreed to stop buying Russian oil, because that's one of the areas Russia's evading sanctions with. However, the Indian government seemed to have not received the memo on that. They were a little bit surprised and didn't say they had stopped buying Russian oil. So where do things stand on that front?
That's a great question. So if Donald Trump wanted to get really tough on Russia, he has a number of options. He can tighten sanctions. He can enforce the existing sanctions. He refuses to put more sanctions on Russia for a wide variety of reasons, but he has the power as the president to do so. But when you talk to sanctions experts, they'll say that the U.S. just needs to enforce what's already on the books. So that's one. He can also authorize the use of Tomahawks, the discussion we saw yesterday. That would be a game changer. So Ukraine needs to be able to have long-range fires to hit behind enemy lines. It needs to be able to hit Russia's energy grid and also its command and control center and its ammo depots. If it does that, if Ukraine can get enough long-range fires, the war is over. So it's weapons, sanctions, and then Congress needs to authorize another package of weapons. They did this in April of 24. The Ukrainians are running low again on supplies. They're running low on people. So these are the three things that Trump can do. He just chooses not to. In terms of sanctions, I don't expect to see him do anything new. And he really is reticent to put those sanctions in place on Russia, unfortunately.
Now, Melinda, you touched on there the Tomahawk missiles, because they are the U.S. long-range missiles. So I just wanted to circle back to that. How important are they to Ukraine? I mean, are they a game changer?
They are absolutely a game changer, and Donald Trump put it yesterday. He very well. He said it's a big deal. So Tomahawks are extremely capable cruise missile. It depends on the system we would send, Catherine, but they go about 1,000 miles. It would enable Kyiv to hit behind enemy lines. They would be able to strike Moscow, St. Petersburg. They're escalatory. Let's not pretend otherwise. Ukraine is developing its own long-range cruise missiles now. It has long-range drones, but they're not super accurate. The Tomahawks are much more accurate, much more deadly. I interviewed brigade commanders back in May in Ukraine, and one brigade commander told me if we have 2,000 Tomahawks or something similar, the war is over. So it is an absolute game changer. And naysayers who say, no, it's just another expensive, system that the Ukrainians want are absolutely wrong. Ukraine needs long-range fires alongside drones to end this war. And the war will end when Ukraine has enough firepower to do so.
And, Melinda, just one final question for you here. To go back to the relationship between Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump, you know, it's been a little trying among times. His first visit, he was berated for not dressing appropriately in the Oval Office. This time, you know, he came with the suit all set. But they just seem to have trouble making a connection. What more can the Ukrainians do besides trying to be the last voice Donald Trump hears before he makes his decision?
Catherine, I love that question. So the Ukrainians are really smart and they've studied Donald Trump. And you have to remember, Volodymyr Zelensky is an actor and a comedian, and he's brilliant at making a connection with people. So when Volodymyr Zelensky walks into a room, he bounces. He has great eye contact. He's very warm. He doesn't speak English very well. That's one of his big drawbacks. It's getting better. And I think he's made that connection with Trump. Remember, he is a showman and he's used to being the center of attention. So I think from that disastrous February meeting that you just spoke about, Zelensky's figured out he has to pull back and let Donald Trump and be the star. So I think I see a lot of learning in the way that he's treating Trump. So that's one. Number two, the Ukrainians have been speaking to Melania Trump, the first lady. Melania Trump is no fool. She's from Eastern Europe. She has Putin's number and she cares deeply about Russia's kidnapping of Ukrainian children. Russia has kidnapped more than 20,000 Ukrainian children and given them new identities. And this is an issue that Melania talks to Trump about a lot. Number three, I see General Keith Kellogg's power increasing. I think that President Trump listens to him more, and Keith Kellogg goes to Ukraine frequently and has very close relationships with the Ukrainians. And then fourth, I think that Donald Trump is sick and tired of being played by Putin. We saw over the summer, Russia really hit Ukraine hard with drones and long-range rockets. I measured the difference between the strikes in 24 versus 25, and it went up 800%, Catherine, 800% more attacks in June of this year than the previous year. So Russia is hitting children, it's hitting old people, it's hitting schools, hospitals, universities, and Trump sees those images and they bother him. And Melania brings that up to him over and over again. So I think the Ukrainians are doing a great job of making sure that Donald Trump understands the war. Yesterday, Zelensky talked about how Trump understands much more and he's been studying. So I think the Ukrainians just need to keep doing what they're doing and continue to work with the First Lady as well.
Melinda, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your expertise. That's Melinda Haring, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center.